All right, so good morning, everyone. I am Jennifer Slattery with the League of Cities and Towns, and we're excited to have our colleagues here today to discuss all things related to procurement and engineering services. We have quite a bit of content to get through today, so I am going to toss it right over to Ken DaCosta, and we'll move from there. Thanks. Hi, Ken.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ken DaCosta. I'm the National Director for ACEC Rhode Island and a very active member on our QBS committee. Presenting this morning along with me will be Maureen Schlebeck, who is the chairperson for our QBS committee. Dorothy Davison, the Executive Director for ACEC Rhode Island. Tom Bovis, who is the Interdepartmental Project Manager for the State of Rhode Island Department of Administration, and Bill Riccio, the Director of Public Services for the City of Newport. As Jennifer said, we do have a lot of material to get through this morning. I would ask that if you've got any questions, if they are particularly relevant to the slide that's up, then please put them in the chat room and we'll monitor that. Or you can just hold them until the end of the presentation and we'll address them as part of a Q&A process. The purpose of today's presentation, Maureen, you got it?
Thanks. I was having trouble advancing the slides.
No, that's fine. The purpose of the presentation is really to clarify the procurement process for engineering services within the state of Rhode Island for the municipalities. And to answer any questions regarding the proper process and how you should be proceeding. Just a little background on ACEC. We're 41 member organizations, primarily engineers, land surveyors, planners, working in the built environment in Rhode Island. Nationally, there are 52 member organizations, 50 states plus 2 regional organizations, representing over 5,000 firms and 500,000 employees. One of our goals is to partner with local agencies to make sure that their projects are proceeding in an appropriate manner. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about procurement best practices. And there are, I believe, 8 of them. I'm first and foremost, and I think most important to the process, is to establish a local team for your project. And it's identify all the stakeholders, whether they be the purchasing officials, the building committee, engineers, public works, planners, the end users, and make sure that you have a team that represents the best interests of the community. Secondly, is to evaluate what laws and regulations will govern your procurement. And it's depending on number 3, which is your funding sources, what federal, state, and local laws will apply to your procurement. Number 3, to identify funding sources. A very critical element in all of this is to determine the project budget. And there are ways you can do that. There are certainly benchmark methods for coming up with projects. There are resources out there, including ACEC Rhode Island. And I have never met a consultant who wouldn't help a community try to put their project together and develop a budget for it. So please reach out to ACEC as a resource if you have that need. But within the funding sources is really to identify what strings are attached to the money that you're getting. If you're getting federal grants, if you're getting state grants, there are always reporting provisions, regulations for how you proceed, and make sure that you clearly understand what those are as you're proceeding. Number 4 is to really, I'm going to say, develop your scope of work. And at this point, it doesn't have to be extremely detailed, but it has to identify what you want and what you don't want in your project. Again, there are resources out there to help you understand what you need. This is particularly important in complex projects, that those people who are going to be competing for your project have a firm understanding of what it is you want, what you don't want, what you expect. Meeting client expectations is something we deal with every day. Next slide, Maureen.
I'm sorry, we're having a little trouble advancing the slides. I don't know why. There we go. Thanks.
The number 5 is really to choose your solicitation method, and we'll go into in more detail as we go along about what these methods are. But your choices as a municipality are to use a qualifications-based selection process, QBS, or utilize the state's MPA 584 for engineering services, which Tom and Dorothy will talk about as we proceed. Number 6 is to develop your RFP. And again, to let the firms who are going to be competing understand what your needs are. I say scope detailed. It has to be as detailed enough for people to fully understand what it is you're trying to achieve. But you should be utilizing the selected firm ultimately to come up with what the final scope for a project will be. Within the RFP, you need to tell them what it is you expect them to be submitting, what you're going to use as a means and method for scoring, and what timeframes there will be, both response time, how to submit questions, who's going to field the questions. I think it's very important that you have a single source for fielding questions so that people are getting the same information with every question. Number 7, and this is particularly valuable for large complex projects, is to let people know ahead of time that your request for qualifications and proposals is upcoming. It helps them formulate teams that may be necessary for those complex projects. It's going to help you get the best response that you can get. In terms of choosing, you've established who your overall project team is. If you want that to be the same panel that is reviewing the qualifications, by all means do that. But sort of 8 and 9 sort of go together, is making sure that you've got a transparent process, that everyone out there, as I said before, gets the same information. Once the selection is made, please notify the winner and notify all respondents. It helps them to understand for future activities where they missed the boat, and just provide some clarity to the whole system. If a firm is not selected, please tell them why. At this point, I'd like to ask Bill Riccio, who's been through this process many times, if maybe he can share some thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Riccio. I'm the Director of Public Services with the City of Newport. I've been here for about 15 years. Prior to this, I was with the DOT for about 17. So I'm very familiar with this process from my years at DOT, and it has helped us significantly here in the City of Newport. QBS, just as Ken's been talking about, we've used it on large scale projects, such as a streetscape improvement we did probably about 10 years ago along Broadway. We've also issued them for another streetscape improvement project on Spring and Thames Street. We've also used it on, most recently, we teamed up with the Division of Statewide Planning to issue a QBS for a transportation master plan for the city that is inclusive of both the city and state facilities throughout the community. As for the MPA is a great resource for us, especially as municipalities. because it allows us to use a QBS process that has been solicited by the state, which allows, and state law allows any municipality to jump on those procurements. So it's an easy way, as Ken had indicated earlier, to reach in. It could be a small intersection improvement. It could be, a small survey you need. It could be, anything. We're going to get into thresholds of expenditures and stuff, but anything. So it actually changes the amount of time and the dynamic, because it allows you to reach into a pre-qualified pool of firms that you can then utilize to solicit proposals from based on regulations. It's a little bit of a snapshot.
Thank you, Bill. The next 3 slides, I'm just going to tell you the slides, if they haven't already been made available to you, they will. The next 3 slides just offers some guidelines or some thoughts about developing a checklist for your procurement process. The one item in here that I think needs attention is conflict of interest checks. And that's making sure that the stakeholders and those who have been identified as being critical to a project don't have any conflicts. A businessman who may feel like he is going to get an advantage if certain things happen on the streetscape project. Those kinds of things that need to be fleshed out in advance. But otherwise, let's just, in the interest of time, Maureen, just skip through the next 3 slides and let people know that those checklist items are available to them or will be made available to them. At this point, I'd like to ask Dorothy to run us through the Rhode Island procurement law.
Great. So now the exciting stuff, the municipal procurement law. So Rhode Island has a law focused just on municipal procurement. It's 4555-1. And it was basically to establish a uniform system to award contracts by municipalities. So in 4555-2, it does a deeper dive and states that all municipal contracts shall be awarded by qualification-based selection for architects and engineers pursuant to 4555-8.1. And that's more detailed. So when a purchasing agent determines that you need the services of an engineer, in our case, then they shall follow qualification-based selection for the procurement of those services. B talks about the federal regulations. So the federal regulations, something called the Brooks Law, which is highlighted there, requires qualification-based selection and procurement of all architectural, engineering, and consulting services. And so anytime you're using federal money, generally, you're going to have to follow the Brooks Act. And Rhode Island's general law is really what they call a mini Brooks Act. It's basically just another version of the Brooks Law on the national level. Section C talks about pre-qualification, which Ken and Bill alluded to, which is that MPA 584, that you can pre-qualify firms, you can use pre-qualified lists from other state agencies to meet the requirements of this section, or you can pre-qualify firms yourself if you want to. And the last D just makes it talks very specifically about that prior to selecting a firm for negotiation for procurement, you can't ask for verbal or written estimates or costs or dollar amounts or hours required of a construction cost or any other measure of compensation. So you procure first on qualifications, experience, and how they respond to your proposal. And then once you choose that top firm in negotiation, then you can start talking about costs. So that just makes makes it very specific. And then we've had some questions about, what is procurement like under the federal IIJA, all that money that's coming in different tranches in different areas. So for transportation projects and highway and transit projects, all state and local recipients are required to follow the Brooks Act. And there's an FHWA guidance memo, which we've put a link to below, which says that it applies to any projects where federal funds are used, as well as state and local expenditures on architectural engineering contracts using non-federal matching funds. And then similarly for water projects, a lot of IIJA money went into the Clean Water Revolving Fund. For all wastewater projects, you have to comply with the Brooks Act or an equivalent state process, which would be our mini Brooks Act. And then there is a broad group of other programs and grants. Those don't specifically say expressly mandate QBS, though based on the federal guidance and policy memos, they consider it best practice. Also, the federal common law grant rules generally require that state entities follow state-based laws and regulations requiring the use of QBS, which again would take us back to Rhode Island's Mini Brooks Act.
Thanks, Dorothy. I'm going to chime in here, Maureen Schlebeck, and I'm going to just walk you through quality-based selection. And I'm going to try to demystify it because I think it sounds cumbersome and daunting when you're not used to it. But it's really intended to be a simple and competitive process. And the intention is to match the level of your project and the detail you need with the right engineering firm. Choose the firm and then work on the cost negotiations afterwards. So how does it work? Well, we start by selecting and retaining the professionals, whether it's engineers, land surveyors, or architects. You go through a competitive procurement that's based upon experience, what you bring to the table in terms of your qualifications. You do deal with the scope, but the scope gets further refined once you've selected a firm that you want to move forward with. The thing to remember too is it's always in the control of the municipalities. I mean, even after you've chosen a top-rated firm and you begin to deal with them with the details of exactly what's in the scope of the project and the fee, you still have the opportunity to control the situation. If you're not feeling comfortable with the negotiations you have, you can always go to your second highest ranked firm. QBS is endorsed by nearly everybody in the profession. I won't read them all, but there's lots of them up there. And, again, some of this gets repetitive. Who uses it? As Dorothy said, if federal money's being spent, you're required by the Brooks Act. And on the state and local level, 46 of the US states have QBS laws, Rhode Island being one of them. And even in the private industry, they are picking engineering services based upon qualifications and not based on low bid. So what does QBS evaluate? It evaluates a whole host of things. We're looking at a proponent's experience, their expertise, their availability, their training. You can check references. And again, it's your project. You can decide how valuable each of these components is. For example, if getting the job started and underway is a top priority, availability may come in as a higher priority to you than some of the other things. And then those are your choices. So why use QBS over other methods? And everything I'm going to speak on moving forward is really based on national studies that have been done on engineering projects, both ones that are done with a QBS procurement and ones that are done without it. So QBS saves money and time. It simplifies your complex projects. It encourages innovation and it drives procurement. So I'm going to drill down into each of these as we move forward. How does QBS save money? So I think when you think about the engineering upfront, the more effort you put into your design work, the savings come to you in the construction staging. So if you have a really well thought out engineered design, when you get to construction, you're not getting a lot of surprises. And we all know we hate the surprises in construction. They are always costly. They cause delays to the construction schedule. It's always easier to deal with issues on the design front than it is when you're out, in the field constructing something. So there's proven cases of how QBS will save money over the time of a project. It also saves time, and I think I probably spoke a little ahead on this as well. again, just the delays that happen in construction when you don't have a thorough design that's been well thought out. And quite honestly, if you're going to bid something as a low bid, the proponents that are bidding on that job have to just take the quickest, easiest path to get a design to you. So, when you're talking about a complex project, that doesn't leave time to work out every detail. It's like you're going to choose the fastest method to design, and you're not going to explore all the options available to a municipality. And some of those options that get explored in the engineering phase really save the communities, either in construction, but also we haven't even talked about life cycle costs. That's another place where you can save a lot of costs with a well-engineered project. Just the long-term maintenance of a facility, what happens in construction, and what your life cycle costs wind up being. So, you're able to match how complex your project is with what level of an engineering firm you want to bring on, and it winds up being beneficial for all. QBS also delivers innovation, and again, it takes you back to if you have to bid a job to win it on price, you don't have time to explore new ways to design a project. It's not only cost and schedule that you can focus on. We actually worked on a project where we were replacing lighting in Bridge 550 in Pawtucket, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It takes 95 over the Seekonk River. If you can picture that bridge, there's some Art Deco style pylons on that bridge. And if you're a passenger, next time you go over it, look at those closely, because there's a very small rectangle in them. And that is actually the spot where the maintenance people have to enter the pylon to get to the lighting fixtures. So when we were exploring this, we were out there with Ride-Out Maintenance, and they were citing the safety concerns that they had and how inconvenient it was. And because we had some engineering budget and time that we could spend on this project, we were able to develop a different method of getting to the lighting fixtures. We designed something where the elements were, the wiring from the lighting was taken down the side of the bridge, which again, every time you change something on a project, you get into a whole host of other problems. We wanted to take the wiring down, put a control cabinet on the bridge. The bridge department was not happy with us touching the bridge. So we're like, okay, now we put it on the ground. And then that meant we had hazmat, CRMC, RIDEM permits. We wound up in the end using helical piles, which actually drill piles down into the ground without bringing dirt up, so which got us out of the permitting and the hazmat. We were able to put these piles in, build a platform. Well, it's actually out to construction now. They'll build a platform for the lighting fixtures for the cabinet, and the maintenance men will be able to reach all the equipment at ground level. So, I mean, again, here was a solution that came out of a project not intended from the beginning, but had we only looked at that as a low bid project, we would have had to just replace in kind. So we were able to do some real beneficial safety improvements for those maintenance people. So professional architectural and engineering services, when you stop and think about it, they really comprise about 10% of the project construction costs, and even less of a percentage of the total life costs. So, you wind up being penny wise and pound foolish if you're going to get caught up in getting a low cost engineering fee to put your project out. You're really better off really thinking about that engineering scope and fee and making it be appropriate to the level of the project. These services are creative by nature. It's critical thinking skills, intellectual effort. You need that time to investigate and analyze and research. It's not a tangible commodity. And so a lot of times people will throw out the example and say, well, hiring an engineer, you wouldn't hire a heart surgeon low bid. But I think the best example that we can all relate to is if you think about when you're hiring staff, what you do, say you wanted a principal planner added to your staff, you wouldn't just collect resumes and say, who wants the lowest salary, we'll hire them. You would collect those resumes, you would do interviews, you would try to match the skill set to the position. You don't You don't want someone way overqualified, you don't want someone very underqualified, but you want to match that up and move forward with what makes the most sense. And that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of how QBS is working with engineering and architectural services as well. So the steps for QBS, and some of this is a little repetitive to what we've talked about before on the procurement steps. You would identify your need for a consultant. You would come up with a general scope of work that would later be more refined. And then, as Ken talked about, it's so important to really develop your selection criteria. You'd advertise that project. Some of these steps become optional as you start to get your qualifications submitted. You could choose to interview the top 3 firms if that matches the level of your project. And then you would rank those firms, and you would begin with the top ranked firm to negotiate the scope, the schedule, the fee, and other contractual terms. You know, again, that criteria should be based on the qualifications relevant to the project. It should be an objective weighted scoring process. And it should be supplemented with any agency goals that you want, such as DVE participation. The level of effort for the request on the qualification should be consistent with the value of the project. Obviously, if it's a lower priced kind of fast project, you're not going to want a big elaborate proposal from the proponents. And not all of the projects merit an interview process, and those are your choices to make. Again, you know, you are in control of the process, and the level of detail should be consistent with the information that is available to the proponents. So these are types of features that you may want to evaluate as you're qualifying your firms. What's the availability? What is their experience? What are their references checked out as? What kind of training do they have? And what expertise do they bring to the table? And again, once you've made a selection, it is helpful to notify all the firms, whether they were chosen or not. And by sharing the evaluation criteria and ranking, it does help our industry as a whole. We, on the consultant side, we really value the debrief and interviews. It helps us to be better on the next round, and it helps you to get better proposals as you move forward with your projects. So the negotiation happens now, as we've all said a few times, after you've selected a firm. And this is when the discussions happen and the scope gets really fine-tuned. And you can come up with really tangible matches of, you know, what are the deliverables and when are the milestones in the projects, and how does it get approved before you move to a next task. And even a lot of the contract requirements, you know, insurance and conflict resolution can all be fine-tuned during this negotiation process. So I'm going to pass it on to Tom, who's going to explain to you a little bit more about the MPA.
Thank you. Thanks about that. Tom Bovis, I'm with the Department of Administration, Division of Purchases. I head up the construction team here over at the state of Rhode Island at Capitol Hill. And I can go over the MPA that we have associated with this. We started working with ACEC maybe about 5 years ago, even not longer, Ken, to look at the QBS model, because we never had a QBS model before. We had MPA 494, which encompassed architectural and engineering services into one, which is basically low-cost projects. So what we did is we separated MPA 494 and 584, but we still have 494, which is strictly for architectural services only. And then we split it up into MPA 584, which was all engineering disciplines. So we bid this out about a year and a half ago at this point in time. And we do have the MPA 584, which is again, a QBS model, qualification-based model, where the agencies do mini bids. Agencies throughout the state of Rhode Island can utilize this MPA. They go out and they select from whatever discipline they're looking at, because there are 11 disciplines that we have it broken up into. We have it by electrical engineering, all various disciplines, civil engineering, and you can find those on our website. We tell them to exclude pricing from technical submissions to the agencies. If they want, they can interview them. And then they negotiate with the most qualified firm for pricing and scope. If they cannot come up with an agreed price with the most highest scoring firm, they can then go to the next second firm that is highest scoring. Now, one of the things that was asked and they cannot do is if they cannot come up with a pricing with the second most scoring first, they cannot go back to the first. They can't go back and forth with each other. That is not allowed. They would have to actually terminate the solicitation and rebid it again. So that is not allowed. The way we have it placed right now is we have 3 tiers on it. If the estimate from the agency is that the project will cost under $25,000 with any one of the engineering disciplines, we don't encourage it, but they do have the opportunity to go solicit with a firm that they feel might be most qualified for a specific job. They contact the firm directly. They get a technical proposal. If they feel a technical proposal is sufficient, they sit down, negotiate a price. Then they get all the information over to the purchasing department, would come to me or my team, and we would issue a purchase order based on that. The next tier level is from $25,000 to $150,000. In this case, they must get 3 proposals from the firms that are identified in each discipline. They then rank them. They have their own technical committee that ranks them. The highest scoring firm from the committee has the opportunity then to go and negotiate the price, that it's fair price, with the highest scoring firm. And then they would submit that documentation to purchasers and the team over the construction team to issue a PO. Same thing happens here. If you cannot negotiate if you can't come up with the pricing with the highest scoring, you have the opportunity to go to the second highest scoring, but you cannot go back and forth again. If they can't come up with first, second, or they don't feel anybody else is qualified, they would have to cancel it and resubmit. Anything over $150,000 in the engineering world here that we need services for has to be a full solicitation. We post that one on our website. Anyone that feels they're qualified for that can submit a proposal. Again, it's still qualification based. So in other words, all they're submitting is technical qualifications, public bid. We open it publicly. We list all the firms that have submitted for that so people can see it. Technical review team looks at it, scores it. Once they've scored it, they then must go to the State of Rhode Island's A&E committee, which Nancy McIntyre, state purchasing agent, is the committee chair. We also have a public member on it. We also have a DOT member, and then one person from the agency will be on the team. We recently had one for University of Rhode Island, which was in the $300,000 range, negotiated after the fact, but they had to go to the committee and they had to present to the committee the proposal, how many people submitted, how they decided on the highest scorer. The committee then approves to move forward with negotiations. I then send a memo to the Director of Administration, Director Thorson, who approves the agency to move forward with negotiating a final price. Once they negotiate a final price with them, they contact me, say we've come up with a final pricing, and we at purchasing again move forward to issuing a purchase order to that firm.
Thank you, Tom. At this point, we'd like to open it up to questions. Got to be at least one question.
Or you can put questions in the chat box too. So we have some questions if nobody else does that sometimes people ask.
I don't mind jumping in here. Hi, this is Adam from Gloucester. Sorry, I turned my camera on. You mentioned earlier about the qualifications when you're ranking respondents to an opportunity. Any suggestions? Are those just developed internally in terms of the ranking system? Does that have to be specified somewhere? Is there a rubric that is a sample or any recommendations in terms of developing that ranking system? And is that something that needs to be shared with the respondents so they know how they're going to be evaluated? Thank you.
We have at the state of Rhode Island, we do have criteria, general criteria, but the agency's allowed to change the criteria how they think it's important. For an example, expertise or scheduling or modeling. So we do have like 4 basic criteria that typically that we use, but again, the agency has the opportunity to change that as see fit. I do see some of the staff from the construction team here on. And if you look to our website, I believe that there are formats and templates on there for agencies that use some of this information. So if it's for an example, if it's an MPA that's qualification based, there are some templates on there to show you what kind of criteria they use for scoring.
And you should, in your proposal, list the criteria and the percentages that you assign for the selection price for each criteria.
Exactly. Now, one of the things that we're looking at right now is we're looking to change the scoring mechanism at this point, because they'll have a category which is experience, and that's 40 points, for example. And my argument's always been is, what does 40 points really mean? Where somebody gives it 40, another person gives it 36, 38, 19. So we are going to be changing our scoring criteria on a 1 to 5 basis, because most people do surveys on 1 to 5 basis. It's not rolled out yet, but I am working on it just to let you know, because a lot of people take surveys 1 to 5, a lot easier to follow than what does 40 points mean. And then what happens would be prorated based on the importance. So we'll roll that out probably in the next month or so.
We have a couple of questions in the chat box. First question is, how do you handle 2 equally qualified engineering firms? And Bill, maybe you can respond to that. How would you handle a situation in Newport where you had 2 firms that you thought were equally qualified?
I think that's where the optional interviews come in. We have, on the large scale projects that we've done, we always have exercised the interview component. In my career, I've never seen one land. I've seen them land close, but I've never seen them land within or exactly equal. And that's usually because there's probably 4 or 5 people that are evaluating. And then when you multiply that over the numbers of criteria and stuff, it's very difficult to get an exact equal match. I don't know about Tom. Tom, have you ever seen 2 equally scored individuals?
I'm from the state, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have never seen that, but I think that's a great thing you just said, because we do have that opportunity to interview when we have a technical scoring. And a lot of times at the interview, you can see how these teams blend together and gel together and how you can work with them. So that is sometimes what puts somebody over the top, I think.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Can I elaborate on this a little bit? So we recently had an RFP where we said quals would be looked at, but and then we did different interviews, and ultimately we went the low bidder because they were half the cost. And while the other bid may have scored slightly higher, we couldn't really justify that was worth an extra 40 grand. So I guess, how do you balance cost with quals when, like, yes, this firm may score slightly higher, but is it worth doubling your cost potentially?
Ali, I think one of the answers to that is establishing a clear budget for yourself and understanding what you are willing to spend. You always have that control. You maintain budget control through any of the processes. And if in your experience or in your research, you find that this project of this particular type and complexity should be within a certain dollar value, then, even if you went to that number one ranked firm, even if it was just a small difference in their scoring, but negotiated with them that here's what the market is saying that this project should be worth, then you still maintain control over that. And if you're asking for someone to submit a best and final offer on something, that generally doesn't work in terms of getting what you need and what's best for your community. So
In my experience, though, if it's a QBS model, you wouldn't have multiple costs up front.
correct.
You'd only be, negotiating with the highest scoring firm. Now, in a case where it's not a QBS, I will tell you, in the past, we have like an A&E services to do a large scale facility. I've run into that a number of times where is it worth spending $100,000 more for a firm that's, 2 points higher? And my answer would be no. And I would go back and recommend, and I would go back to the agency and work with them and say, I don't think that, the extra half a point, 1 point warrants, this extra funding of X amount of dollars per percentage wise. That's a non-QBS model. In the QBS model, obviously, you would not have costs. You would negotiate with the highest score. If that's very high, then you go to the second. You have the opportunity to go to the second highest bidder. Like Ken said, if you have a budget established and then twice your budget is, then you can't stay with the highest scoring bidder. You would have to go to the next highest scoring bidder and then compare the cost of hopefully that one's less.
It's how do you compare it if you don't have other costs from other engineering firms? If you're just negotiating with the highest qualified and you don't exactly know the market rate unless you've contacted other engineering firms previously and gotten a ballpark range, how do you know that you're spending $100,000 extra for those 2 points when you don't have costs from anybody?
No, when I do a non-QBS model, I would have costs from everybody. But on the QBS model, you're right. You would only have the costs associated with the highest scoring bidder at that point in time. But then again, like Ken says, you have a budget. So if that number is like substantially higher than your budget, then might not be for you. And then you have to go to the next highest scoring technical bidder and see what that can come up with. And you go to 2 or 3.
You also have the option of sharing the budget with the people that are proposing on your project. And that allows you to kind of see, firm A is giving you this set of services for that amount for your budget, and that firm B is giving you that. So I think that would get to what you're trying to understand, like where am I getting more for the dollar, as opposed to asking for prices from them and opening it.
Yeah, Maureen, I think that's very important that the submitting firms know what the budget is. And they may say, there's no way I can do this for the money that they've got available, and they'll back out. Or they'll try to convince them that they should be budgeting more money than they have. But the only way that happens is if those budgets are identified and disclosed up front. Moving on, the next question, is there an example of a public selection over $150,000 that's available for use as a guide? Tom, is there anything that you have?
Yes, we just went to the A&E committee several weeks ago. And that was a University of Rhode Island solicitation for I don't have it at the top of my hand, but you could actually find the solicitation and everything on our website. It was Carruthers Library project. And if you go on our website and you just kind of put in some keywords, if you go on all solicitations, ridop.ri.gov, which is around our purchasing website, in the middle column, it'll say all solicitations, drop down all OSP solicitation, which stands for Ocean State Procurers. And then you just on the search bar, on an RFP, type in some keywords like Carruthers Library. It will give you the solicitation. I can go try to find it actually.
Yeah, I think,
Link.
yeah, Karen has asked if we could share a link with her. So Tom, if you could find that, and then we can share that link.
Good question.
I go try to find it. You guys can still talk while I'm
Yep.
trying to look for it. You put me under pressure here.
Sorry,
I
sorry.
know the
about that.
floor is
I'm
open. We
kidding.
need another question to help Tom out here.
I have some of my my real experts online I can see here that can probably look for it quicker than I do.
Are there any other questions?
This is Diane Williamson. I have a question about the MPA. So if I heard Tom correctly, we really can't use the MPA for anything over 150,000 because we would have to do a full solicitation for that particular project. Is that correct? So if it's less than that, based on what I heard, if it's less than 25,000, we can solicit proposals from somebody on the MPA. And if it's between 25 and 150, we can solicit, we have to get at least 3 proposals from the MPA. But if it's over 150, we really can't use that because we have to do a separate dedicated RFP to our project. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
That's correct, Diane. And those dollar figures are for the engineering services, not the total project value. So if you expect that you will have a design contract or a study contract that will be over $150,000, then you have to go to the open solicitations.
Thank you.
And that was the case with the previous MPA as well, even though some people went in a different direction with it.
I don't know if I can share my screen a minute so you can take a look at it. Does that work here?
Yep.
What do I do with it here?
Toggle on the bottom, you should see a share screen.
Yeah, I share, but I'm trying to think. It's got a bunch of stuff up here.
We're seeing your Zoom meeting.
Yeah, just Zoom. Let me see if I can go back in. Oh, I'm getting expertise in here coming in to help me. There we go. Can you see it?
There we go, yes.
Yay.
This is the RFP 2300-1605, which was A&E Design Services for URI Carruthers Library. And basically, if you go on the website, you can actually upload all this information, the template they used, all the folks. I don't think we've awarded this one yet. I think it's still under, we're waiting for the final pricing. But you can, like, if you look on the template here, you can see what the solicitation was. The other thing we use now is, I don't know if us towns and municipalities use this, is we use a bidder attestation form. And basically what that says is they have to sign this, that they have not assisted the agencies in writing up the RFP. Because if they have, they're not allowed to bid on it. But this is the website. If you go under, I'll go backwards and then into it. This is our website. OSP solicitations. And then all I threw was Carruthers under the search bar.
Tommy, show them how to get to the MPA 584 list of
Yep.
pre-qualified firms while you're on there. That might
Yep.
be helpful because
Yeah.
it's a little tricky.
Yeah, and then if you, like I said, if you just clicked on this, you would get the solicitation. But if you go up our main page, right? This is our main page right here, Division of Purchases. All the way to the right, middle way through, it says Contract Board. Click on Contract Board again, drop down. Under the search bar, all you have to do is type in 584. And then all the disciplines you can see come up. A through whatever it is, 11th letter. And then if you just click on any of these, it'll give you all the firms that are here, all the contacts. And then drop down at the bottom, you can see everybody's actual PO associated with it. And all the information you need. The user guide is on here too, down the
Yeah, the
bottom.
user guide was really helpful, I think.
And it tells you what the user guide is. Here's the, and here's the thresholds identified here for each one. But if anyone has any questions, you can call me directly, email me. Stop sharing now. Is that good? What do you want?
That was
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
And I think too, Dorothy, when you follow up, maybe you can share everybody's contact info as well as a link to Tom's page, and that would really, I think, help facilitate.
I thought I saw it on one of the slides. Maybe we didn't, I missed
Yeah,
it.
it's at the end of our program. I don't think we got through. We have 2 more slides, but they're just resources and my contact
Okay.
information. But I'll do everyone's Tom's contact information and the link to the MPA guide.
It's not advancing again. Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, we had just a few frequently asked questions. We might have touched on these. If you can't come to an agreement with the top ranked firm, you can go to the second ranked firm. And as Tom mentioned, you can't reverse the process.
The other thing I want to mention is the state of Rhode Island utilizes custom AIA documents for these services. So, and those can be found on our website, all the customized, they are state of Rhode Island customized. Legal folks worked with the AIA folks to develop our customized forms.
Good, thank you. The next question, why not ask for prices from 3 qualified firms? So each firm would interpret the scope in their own manner and maybe not necessarily the way that the owner would interpret it. So that's where when you get to those discussions where you really go through the scope, you can come up with a firm understanding of what's moving forward. And there's lots of ways to adjust your price to be price competitive that are not really beneficial to either side. How does the owner know that they're getting a fair price in negotiations? So again, a lot of the engineering firms will get their business from repeat clients. Client satisfaction is really what we strive for. So you can see how that's going to play into this. If you're not convinced that the fees are fair, you do not have to advance with the services of that engineering or architectural firm. So again, keep that in mind as well. And then these are some of the resources that Dorothy had mentioned.
So there's ACEC's online QBS resource, and that has all sorts of information about the process. And then Tom's MPA user guide 584. And then the other National Institute of Building Sciences just talks about project delivery systems and which ones are really the best. And then finally, there's the Rhode Island State Purchasing Act, which throws you over to the Rhode Island procurement for municipalities, which is the 4555.8.1. And then there's one more slide, I think, which has my contact information on it in our website. If you have questions, and I will send out Tom's information as well as everybody else's, and the links to the MPA guide.
Perfect. And I also am going to send, excuse me, Dorothy a link to this recording, and then she can share that all out with you folks, and feel free to share with any of your colleagues that would find this relevant and informative and exciting. If there aren't any other questions, we'll kind of do a going once, going twice. I would like to thank everyone here for 1, attending, and 2, presenting. I'm glad we got so many people to attend and join us today because it's certainly important information to have. And on behalf of the League of Cities and Towns, thank you. Thank you for presenting and thanks for attending. And this concludes our last workshop Wednesday of the I still operate in semester timeframe, so probably of December, and then we'll start up again in January after the holidays. So I do thank you all, and I hope you have a great holiday season. Thanks,
you,
folks.
Jennifer.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.